I don't know how you want to judge the video that I'm about to show you. Some people will say, some people will welcome what this mullah has to say regarding hijab. Some people are saying that this just means that they are scared and this is a defense mechanism. You let me know what your interpretation is of what this mullah is about to say. Let me actually make sure that I selected the right video. Hold on.
اگر بنا بود که مجادات داشته باشه باید میگفت. اگر نگفت.
So this mullah in Iran is now trying to argue that Islamically hijab is not mandatory. And again, this is a mullah in Iran. I think they are. So the interpretation that a lot of people have of this is that they're being defeated so much by women taking off their hijab that some mullahs are thinking that maybe we should just come and say that hijab is not mandatory by Islam just to save our skin. Because remember, guys, when I tell you that women without hijab are a huge threat to the Islamic Republic, is because the Islamic Republic, everybody needs to understand this. Israel and hijab, they are destroying the Islamic Republic for this very basic and simple reason, because these two are making the Islamic Republic lose its base. If Israel ever results in the Islamic regime toppling, it's not because they came and destroyed the regime. It's because they made the people who are the pro-regime lose faith in the regime because they weren't able to return back the aggression of Israel. And if Iranian women ever managed to topple the regime, it's not because they came to the streets in such large numbers eventually that they managed to come and with force take out the regime. The reason why Iranian women without their hijab will eventually, if eventually they topple the regime, is because by not wearing their hijab, they're making the religious based support of the regime lose faith in the regime because the regime is not able to enforce Islamic laws. So if we assume that the regime, the Islamic Republic in Iran right now has, let's say, I think maybe less than 6% support, if that 6% turns into 3%, they will not be able to survive anymore. And how do you get that 6% to 3? Because this is a religious hardliner support that the regime has. You lose that 6% support, not because the secular-minded, liberal-minded people became bigger. It's because that 6% support it is once an Islamic regime. They did the revolution. They gave martyrs. They gave so much of their lives trying to have an Islamic regime. And this regime is incapable of responding to the enemies of Islam, i.e. Israel, and is incapable of enforcing Islamic laws, most visibly the hijab. This is why I think this mullah is trying to come out and say, you know what? Mandatory hijab is not even part of Islam to begin with, as a way to try to get out of this by saying that we don't have to enforce hijab laws so that we're still Islamic without enforcing hijab laws. They're trying to find a way out. So listen to this. That's my interpretation of what he's saying. Let's listen to what he's saying.
اگر بنا بود که مجادات داشته باشه باید میگفت. اگر
So he's saying if it was supposed to have a punishment for not wearing the hijab, it should have said so. So I think he's referring to the Quran. Like, why doesn't the Quran say that mention a punishment for not wearing the
نگفته
hijab?
باشه العیاذ بالله ما داریم به خدا یک کار قبیحی رو نسبت میدیم.
If we say, if the Quran doesn't introduce a punishment for not wearing the hijab, and we say that God wants punishment for not wearing the hijab, we are basically attributing something ugly, something evil to Allah where he himself has not declared it so.
میگیم خدای متعال اومده چیزی رو که باید میگفت نگفته.
This is basically saying this is a sin in Islam. He's saying if we say that God wants punishment for not wearing the hijab, we're basically suggesting that God is not perfect, because we're saying God hasn't said something that he should have said.
چیزی رو که باید میگفت نگفته.
Yeah, so if God wanted to give punishment for not wearing the hijab, he would have said it. And if we say that God doesn't want us to punish not wearing the hijab, We're basically acting like we know more than God, basically. So we're attributing a saying to God where he himself didn't see fit to say so.
پیامبرش هم نگفته،
Not God didn't say that, his prophet didn't say
ائمه هم
that,
نگفته.
and the imams never said such a thing. So neither God or Muhammad in hadith or the hadith of the 12 imams, you don't see any punishment mentioned for not wearing the
حالا ما
hijab.
از خودمون میخوایم در بیاریم بگیم که مجازاتش که
So we are basically making this up on ourselves. We're just deciding that there should be a punishment for not wearing a hijab, even though there's no hadith or no Quranic verse. Guys, this is bizarre. Do you understand? We didn't have mullah for the past 40 years. We didn't have mullahs in Iran coming out and saying there shouldn't be punishment for not wearing the hijab. This is the inability for enforcing the hijab laws, and now they're trying to make excuses for it, slowly trying to get out of it.
حجاب رو در جامعه حاکم بکنن، یک آیه یا یک حدیث به من نشان بدن که برای عدم رعایت یا یک سیره یا یک سنت به من.
So he's saying if the officials want to enforce hijab laws, please show me at least one verse or one hadith or one seerah, means like the stories of the prophet, or one sunnat, means the one tradition of the prophet or the imams. Give me at least one of these things, either a Quranic verse or a hadith or a seerah or a sunnah. He's saying you don't have any of these four to suggest that in Islam you have to have punishments for not wearing the
نشون
hijab.
بدن بگن آقا فلان آیه میگه عدم رعایت حجاب مجازات داره، یا بگن
just to understand, it's not that he thinks that hijab is a bad, like he thinks you should wear the hijab. Not wearing the hijab, the punishment of it is supposed to be left to Allah. That's what he thinks, not to the government. He's saying we don't have any Islamic tradition where the government enforces the hijab. If Islam says hijab is mandatory, that means that's something between you and Allah, not between you and the government. It basically means that it's a sin not to wear the hijab, but it shouldn't be a crime. That's what he says. It's a sin, but not a crime. That's, I think, his view.
فلان حدیث از پیامبر یا ائمه اطهار فرمودن که عدم رعایت حجاب این مجازات رو داره، یا بیان بگن که نه پیغمبر اکرم صلوات سنت ارائه بده، بگن که پیامبر اکرم صلوات الله علیه چیکار کرده؟ کسی رو به خاطر عدم رعایت حجاب مجازات کرد.
Yeah, for example, he's saying, for example, show me that Prophet Muhammad came and punished somebody. Give me one tradition, one story of Muhammad that he punished somebody for not wearing the hijab.
یا بگن حضرت علی در مقام حکومتش.
So guys, the mullahs that I'm showing you, these are official Islamic scholars from Hosea Ilmiye Qom in Iran, which is basically the highest religious seminary. It's like the Vatican of Shia Islam. That's what it is, right? So if Tehran is the political center of Iran, Qom is the religious center of Iran. It's like Vatican is Qom and Tehran is the political capital. And sometimes there's some tension between these two, right? So these are the very well recognized religious scholars from the Hosea Ilmiye Qom, which is their highest religious. So there's two main religious authorities in Shia Islam. One is in Iraq, the other one is in Iran. So the one in Iraq is Najaf, and the one in Iran is Qom. And the Qom, yeah, so this guy is from Qom.
در مقام حکومتش کسی رو به خاطر عدم رعایت حجاب مجازات کرده. ما چنین چیزی رو نداریم. حجابی که مرحوم مهسا امینی داشت.
This guy, guys, this part, listen to this part. He's saying the hijab that the late Mahsa Amini was wearing, what do you think he's going to say next? He's now referring to Mahsa Amini. Guys, this is a confirmation of all the things that I've been telling you on this channel. So let's listen what he has to say. Listen to this part.
مرحوم مهسا امینی داشت و متاسفانه بردن ارشادش بکنند و اون مسائل پیش اومد.
And he's saying Mahsa Amini, who unfortunately they took her to give her some advice and all the things that we know happened.
به نظر من امروز آرزوی حکومته.
he says, I think today the hijab that Mahsa Amini was wearing is the type of hijab that is the wish of the Islamic Republic right now, the wish of the government right now. Do you understand what he's saying? So this whole wave of the anti-hijab rebellion in Iran started with Mahsa Amini. Mahsa Amini was wearing her hijab, but her hijab was not worn properly, right? And that's why she was arrested. This man is saying we have now reached a point that it is the biggest dream of the regime right now if women were at least wearing right now what Mahsa Amini was wearing. Because women in Iran are wearing so much less than Mahsa. The new trend, the new norm in Iran is way, way, way less than what Mahsa Amini was wearing at that time. The cat lady is saying you never appreciate what you have until you lose it. Sure. Yeah, basically. Do you see what an admission that is?
بکنن دور مسائل پیش اومد به نظر من امروز آرزوی حکومته، آرزوی حاکمیته، آرزوی خیلی هاست که همین حجاب خانم مهسا امینی امروز رعایت بشه.
Yeah, he's saying it's the dream of the officials that the type of hijab that Mahsa Amini was wearing, that women in Iran were just wearing at least that type of hijab. I'm going to show you now another video that is going to demonstrate so perfectly how things have escalated since just a few months ago. And it's a huge example of how things are escalating to a point that I think a lot of you are not realizing.